You can't talk about art history without seeing the impact Catholicism has had on art, and the impact that art has had on Catholicism. It's time for our monthly art history lesson with Charles and Amanda Shepard from the Fort Wayne Museum of Art.
This is Kyle Hyman. I have stopped by the Fort Wayne Museum of Art for my monthly art history lesson from Charles and Amanda Shepard. Thanks for having me again.
Thanks for being here.
Always good to see you.
Yeah. So what are we talking about today?
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about Jusepe de Ribera. And de Ribera, he's working around early 1600s. He's Spanish. In fact, he's the first big name Spanish painter of this time, competing with the likes of Caravaggio and Carracci and, artists that have gotten a lot more fame and glory than he. Mm-hmm. But he moves from Spain and after settling in a couple of different places, moves to Naples. And Naples, a strange twist here because Naples was supposedly a huge art town with no big name artists. Okay. So he becomes the first big name artist to come to Naples and invent the Neapolitan style, which took the tendencies of the day, dramatic lighting and swirl and color, and bends them to his own purposes such that he wants to use them to focus on reality and on iconography and symbolism. Mm-hmm. So he's the only one doing that. And his most famous painting done in Naples in 1626 is St. Jerome. Now, St. Jerome was painted by many different artists, but de Ribera, going through the story, sees St. Jerome much differently. Instead of as a healthy, well-fed, rosy-cheeked, sometimes even happy and chubby-looking in a study, because St. Jerome, obviously known for his scholarship in working on the biblical texts, he sees him in a different light. He sees him in his suffering out in the desert in emaciated form and fills this painting full of great imagery.
The painting is a large one, and for anyone who might be in Seattle or Texas in the coming months, the painting is actually on loan from Naples to the United States. It's at the Seattle Art Museum now, and in March it'll go to the Kimball Art Museum in Fort Worth, Texas, as part of an upcoming exhibition they have. So if you have the chance to be in either parts of the country, do so. The painting shows the common iconography of Jerome, and for anyone who may not know what that term means, iconography is the traditional, a set of symbols often associated with a religious or ancient figure that's repeated often throughout art history. So for Jerome, he has...
It'd be kind of like a trope.
Yeah, like it's like or when we see statues of saints and they always have... like St. John with the snake over the cup, we'll often see that with St. John, so that when you look at a picture of St. John, that's because that story is associated, or how a saint was killed. You'll see perhaps the instrument of their death. So that's what iconography is. So for St. Jerome, we will see often a skull, which symbolizes his asceticism and his closeness to living on the edge, I suppose, being out in the desert with very little means, him and his work and his creator. There's a scroll here, symbolizes his writing and his translation of the Bible. Mm-hmm. And then he also is often shown half clothed, and in this case, and in a lot of cases, he has a red drape around the lower part of his body, which, though there weren't cardinals in the church at the time, it symbolizes his senior position in the church.
Okay.
He's emaciated. He's surrounded by a craggy, cloud-like, dramatic environment. And then in the top left of the painting, you see this breakthrough of heavenly light, and it very dramatically highlights his emaciated figure, which would have been Caravaggio-esque, the theatrical lighting, the real stark shadows. And then right behind him, we see a very faint, shadowy lion's head, which is a reference to the legend that he tamed a lion by removing a thorn from the lion's paw. So,
which is actually very hard to see.
It's very hard to see, and
some of the reproductions,
and because of the
images.
painting's age, it's also faded.
Yeah.
And then we also have an angel with a horn in the upper part of the painting, and he's looking up to the angel, and his arms are outstretched toward the angel playing the instrument.
Playing the horn, not like a unicorn angel.
No.
Angel with a horn could be taken two different ways.
No, sorry.
And St. Jerome, and this is an aspect that Ribera wanted to stress, St. Jerome had a great deal of lingering guilt from having lived a non-aesthetic life for many years, been not chaste and indulging himself, but he was ill often. And in the course of one of his illnesses, he had a vision that he was living the wrong way entirely and that he needed, to get with God. And so he's going to inflict a certain amount of punishment on himself to remind himself of the shame of his guilt for having lived a good part of his life the wrong way. So to be out alone in the desert, working on his text, he is noted for, after Augustine, being the next most prolific writer and translator. So he's going to concentrate in this terrible environment, barely clothed, not protected from the environments, a lion lurking on the side.
Yeah.
And he's going to go at the text, but here comes the angel. And it reminds me of that vision that he had.
And you talked about this back in May whenever we did one on penitence in art. And there was a painting of St. Peter, but then also a painting that's actually kind of similar to this.
It's similar.
Similarities, but also differences.
Sure. In that painting, Jerome is actually beating himself with a
Right.
rock. In this case, the rock that we have is the skull is sitting on top of a stone, and you see the point of the stone. In this case, his arms are outstretched toward the angel, which I think also signifies that he's holding nothing back. And, he's barely clothed. He has no creature comforts. There's a lion behind him. And he's not trying to protect himself from anything. And, and the angel symbolizes his great reward in that sense.
Now, Ribera, I think, is free to do this kind of work and present Jerome differently than other people because he wasn't in the top 10 of painters at the time, and he became, through this painting and through being in Naples, one of that group. But he was freed really, because he wasn't a star. Okay, well, if I'm not a star, I can do what I want to do, and I want to present Jerome differently than everybody else is doing. So he's cutting his own path, but he's being true to his own sense of, this is how I interpret the story differently from other artists. And that's kind of interesting.
We should also remember the tools that artists of his time would have used to create a painting like this. One of those tools would have had to have been the models for the figures in his painting. And so we as viewers see this painting of St. Jerome and we rever him and, wow, this amazing man. If only I could, do some of the things that he did. But then we also need to be reminded that the model for St. Jerome was just a guy from Ribera's town, and usually from the lower classes. So we have this really interesting reminder that the people in these paintings, though posing as great saints, were also average people, which in a cool way elevates them as well and immortalizes the average person who then becomes St. Jerome because the painting is titled as such.
So somewhere you're saying there was a conversation back in 1626 where the model goes home and his wife says, "What did you do today?" St. Jerome. I'm St. Jerome this week.
Yeah.
Get over yourself. Do the dishes.
So where was this hanging? What was it painted for? Do we know any of the background of who commissioned it, or?
I don't know who commissioned it. It's
you said it was
never
large.
Yes, large. It's never left Naples before, which is very interesting. And I'm imagining that to get it to come to the States with other works by Ribera to do a solo show, it's a minor miracle that painting's ever let go.
Yeah.
With its age. I mean, 1626.
Yeah.
And never taken off the wall.
Right.
Like, my goodness.
And now people go there to see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do they put there? Do they put a print in its place?
They put up a little sign that says, "This painting used to be here and it's now at the Kimball." That's really what they do.
Sorry about your luck. So you mentioned at the beginning Spain and Italy and these different art markets. Is there like this national rivalry going on at the time of art?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And it takes a couple of different forms. To be a country with a lot of great painters would be the goal. And so you're going to find a lot of state support, government support for art training programs, art schools, apprenticeships, et cetera, to strengthen, France over Italy or what have you. And, Naples apparently probably the number 2 size in wealth and population city at the time, but for whatever reason can't seem to get traction on bringing any artists there to stay. All the artists that came there would stay maybe a summer and then not come back. And they were getting better offers in other places. And those other places were trying to promote themselves as being better than anywhere else. And maybe Naples was also complacent because it was already a fancy big city without the artists. So yeah, everybody is sort of a rival. And the artists would take advantage of this, of course, no matter where they were born, to go to whoever was trying to beat another city or another country by commissioning bigger and better works for more money. And I think Ribera recognized it would be smart for him to leave Spain and try to compete. And I think Ribera picked Naples, though, because there wasn't any competition there.
Yeah.
So I can go there and I'm the best painter Naples has ever had.
Yeah.
And it turns out he is.
It's interesting how there's more than just how good of a painter you are, but it can be like the location, opportunities,
politics, patronage, who you know. That's true today.
Right. And what you paint. And at the time, religious art was the thing to do.
Well, exactly. And we've joked before that if you ever back in 1626 told one of these artists like Ribera, there's going to be, in the year 2000, there's hardly going to be any spiritual painting at all. He wouldn't believe you. He said, how could it ever be? That's the only subject matter.
Right.
You think, well, someday it's not going to be.
Right.
And how unfortunate.
Yeah.
Good thing you're alive now.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, as always, I'll have a link to this image in the show notes so people can check it out. And again, this is Ribera's. Is there a particular name for it?
Yeah, it's just called Saint Jerome.
Saint Jerome. All right. Well, thank you so much. What's going on at the museum these days?
Oh, in January and February, we have a wonderful contemporary show by an artist named Ellie Tullis called Theotokos, Contemporary Visions of Mary. And what she did is she painted about 30 portraits of Mary in her own style, but referencing history's master painters. And that is up through March 8th.
And we talked about that last month. If you didn't get a chance to hear her talking about it, it's fascinating to hear the story. And I saw the pictures online and was impressed. It's totally different seeing them in person.
They're amazing. She's a wonderful painter. And on February 6th at 12:15 p.m., Ellie and I will be giving a guided tour of the exhibition.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
FWMOA.org.
That's right.
And FWMOA on social media. Stop by the museum here in Fort Wayne.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
Thank you.